There's a common saying we've all heard as a child, pick on someone your own size. So why do adults feel that it's okay to spank a child as long as it's well deserved? There are currently 19 states that allow spanking in public schools. Sunny Hostin, a legal analyst for CNN, reported this information during a broadcast on July 23, 2014. She also shared that the public schools are the only state-funded institution that allows spanking because it's illegal to spank in mental hospitals and even in prisons. Spanking children is not a good form of punishment or an effective method for disciplining them. I'm going to talk to you about some of the reasons why children shouldn't be spanked. Just because spanking is an old method of discipline doesn't mean it's the best form of discipline. Spanking often leads to aggressive behavior in children, and violence tends to escalate, facilitating the cycle of abuse. I know that most of you might not have your own children, but will start a family in the future. And even if you decide not to have your own kids, you know someone who does. Spanking is a controversial issue that gets brought up in discussions, and you can share the information you learned here today with other parents that may not know the harm they are causing their kids. I'm a mother of 3 girls that are 14, 8, and 5. I became a parent when I was only 16 years old, and now that I'm 31, my friends are finally starting to have their own kids. My friends that have young children often seek my advice on parenting because I have a little more experience and I've been through several different situations with my own kids. I don't claim to be an expert on parenting, but since I became a parent at such a young age, I was highly motivated to prove to everyone in my life that I could handle being a parent, and not only to survive it, but to be the best mother possible. With this extra motivation, I read several parenting books and different articles trying to get all the information to be the best parent. Today, I'm going to share some of the reasons and some of the information I have learned to convince you that spanking is not something to expose children to because it's a flawed form of discipline learned by our parents. It leads to increased child aggression and increases the risk of child abuse. I'm going to start with discrediting the belief that it's okay to spank because your parents spanked you. Several people claim that they were spanked by their parents and they turned out okay, so that they don't see the harm in spanking. As Jordan Ryak points out in the 2007 pamphlet, Plain Talk About Spanking, as a child she was exposed to several different things that we know to be harmful. She was exposed to secondhand smoke daily, her house was painted with lead-based paint, she didn't wear a seatbelt, and she also rode her bike without a helmet. In today's society, we know that these things shouldn't be done. Amy Territos, who is a pediatric nurse practitioner, was quoted during an interview on July 23, 2014 that broadcasted on CNN, stating, 20 to 30 years ago, we didn't sit in car seats, yet we do now. And so maybe they did spank or were spanked as a child, but we now have research that has shown it is less effective than timeout, and it tends to lead to more aggressive behavior. Just because something was done in the past doesn't mean that it's right for it to continue. When you look back at your childhood and think of the hardships you experienced growing up, I think that it's safe to say that we all want children to have a better life than what we had. Now I'd like to move on to discuss the link between spanking and childhood aggression. Spanking children teaches children to become violent. Most people know that children often mimic the behavior that they see, and so when a child is subjected to violent punishment such as spanking, they're more likely to show aggression and have bad behavior. There is a study that was led by research scientist Lisa J. Berlin of Duke University that was published in 2009 that indicates that children spanked at 1-year-old shows more aggression at 2 than children that were not spanked at all. According to another study that was conducted in 2010, it was published in Pediatrics, frequent spanking of a child that is 3 years old correlates to increased aggression when the child's 5. As stated by Brendan L. Smith in the scientific journal Monitor on Psychology that was published during April 2012 in the 43rd volume, states that there are several other studies that have shown that physical punishment like spanking can lead to increased aggression and antisocial behavior in children. Jordan Ryak stated, battering and battered spouses who spank their children are raising them to become batterers and victims exactly like themselves. The children learn from the parents' example that the way to vent frustration, express disapproval, and assert authority is by hitting someone that's smaller and weaker than themselves. The patterns of abuse is a vicious cycle. We need to be teaching our children the correct way to handle difficult situations that happen in a daily situations. The parent-child relationship is a very special bond and it needs to be protected. We need to lead by example and show them that it's okay to be angry or frustrated or upset, but there's a better way to deal with those emotions than lashing out at someone that doesn't deserve it. Timeouts are far more effective way to discipline children because when a parent spanks the child, it destroys the child's trust for that parent. And the parent-child relationship is a very special bond that needs to be protected. When this bond is disrupted, there can be horrible consequences for the child. The final thing that I want to talk to you about is how spanking leads to serious child abuse. I believe that it is well known that violence tends to escalate and spanking is not different. Stephen Bavloke authored a pamphlet titled Red, White, and Bruises, Spanking in America and What to Do Instead, which was published in 1994. He believes that spanking doesn't work as an effective discipline mechanism because it only tells a child what not to do. It doesn't explain what the child should be doing instead. This can lead to more intense and harsher spankings because misbehavior continues and it leaves the parent feeling like the child is not responding to the punishment. So they need to increase the punishment to get the desired response. There is a book by Jamie Pershey titled Kids Need Lots of Love and a Spanking. It was published in 1996. It claims that it will teach you how to spank your child calmly and deliberately so your child knows that they are loved and well cared for. I think that this statement is absolutely ridiculous. Isn't it a characteristic of someone who has severe psychological problems to be able to inflict acts of violence calmly? As stated in the 2007 pamphlet, Plain Talk About Spanking, physical injuries and death of children caused by their caretakers are often consequences of physical punishment like spanking. I spoke with police officer Kyle Jacobs on November 7th of this year, and he recalled the case of the 18-month-old baby girl dying from injuries sustained by abuse. Some of those injuries included bruises on her buttocks, and she also had fractured ribs and vertebrae. He was horrified about the trauma that she sustained at the hands of her mother's boyfriend. And this is only one case here in Kansas, when there are several more cases that end in a death of a child. According to the information from an article I received from CAP's organization, Child Abuse and Neglect Fatalities in 2013, Statistics and Intervention, that was published in April of this year, the NCA-NDS reported that there were 1,484 fatalities in the U.S. from abuse or neglect, and estimates that there were 1,520 deaths of children caused by abuse. This shows how violence tends to escalate, causing harm to children. I can't help but wonder how many children's lives could have been saved if the parents would have taken the time to sit them in timeout, explain to them what they'd done wrong and what they should have been doing instead. I think that it's unacceptable that one child dies from abuse or neglect, and I think that it's completely unacceptable that over 1,400 children die from abuse or neglect in the United States alone. And these are the reasons why it's so unjust to spank children. I hope that you've listened to my message today about how even though spanking was a part of our past, it shouldn't be a part of our children's future, and how spanking leads to aggressive behavior, and spanking can escalate to serious child abuse. Now that you're aware of the consequences of spanking, I hope you share this information with other parents that may be unaware of the harm they are inflicting. Please do not be the cause for the cycle of abuse to continue.